Today I have Nicole with me. Nicole, I always mess up her name. Jan Sejan.
Pretty good. Yeah,
Okay.
John Sevian. Yeah.
Okay. And Nicole, just tell everybody who you're with and where you live.
All right, cool. I'm an independent reporter here in Jerusalem, based in Jerusalem. I've been here about 20 years. You can check out my YouTube channel, which is if you put at Nicoleness, and also my website, nickjan.com, like you see my name written on the screen here. And I cover general things, not the minute to minute news, but I focus on issues with Christians, minority groups, and then some interesting perspectives that I get from living here.
Yeah, and you used to be with All Israel News.
Yeah. I was a news editor. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think you were with them. I think it was almost exactly 2 years ago that we got to know each other when we were over at the Knesset.
Oh
my God! When they were forming the government, and yes, I remember hanging out with you that day, and then thinking about that every now and then. I came across a picture of it, and I'm thinking, like, I think the world has changed a little bit since December of 2022.
Right.
It's right. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about really the just absolute earthquake geopolitically that's happened up in Syria, but it's not sticking to Syria, and it's very complicated. And you have an interesting perspective with some of the, what I would say, the Turkish Russian aspects a little bit further north of Syria, and I want to get into that. So just what's going on, and what's your perspective living in Jerusalem as you do? What's your perspective of everything that's been happening?
Yeah, it's unbelievable, because I think it was around Thanksgiving that the ceasefire went into effect between Israel and Lebanon, which, means really Hezbollah. And, that had been our main focus, especially like if you're in the news, that was your main focus up until that point. And you didn't even get a chance to breathe or to reflect or to, get some, perspective on that, like looking backwards, looking forward. I had actually just even written an article about what I think is going to be Trump's policy toward Lebanon, and also, specifically based on the fact that he's bringing in his daughter and his daughter's father-in-law, who is a Lebanese Christian billionaire, or is it millionaire, Assad Boulos, and he's born in Lebanon and still has connections there, and so that makes me think that Lebanon is going to be a big focus for the incoming Trump administration. So that was all interesting for about 30 seconds, when suddenly the rumblings of the rebels in Syria that had been going on, like right after the ceasefire, then they just exploded onto the scene, and they very easily rolled south through Syria, one city conquering one city after another. And it was like, I think 11 days after the ceasefire that Damascus had fallen. And it was shocking. I mean, it was just like, I think I wrote about this, saying like some intelligence service somewhere must have known that this was going to happen. There must have been rumblings about this in the basements of everybody's intel, but people had no idea in general. Like, it wasn't even in the media. It was just like, oh, the rebels, here and there, and then suddenly they're this full-on military force, and Assad is fleeing. And so now, pivot really quick, like, okay, put Lebanon on hold now. And by the way, I don't claim to be an expert. There are experts on Lebanon. I know you've interviewed them, and there are experts on Syria. And my focus has been, what's happening in Israel, what's happening with the Palestinians, and who are the players here, and also what's happening, with Israeli politics. So suddenly your focus is just a couple miles north in Damascus, and you've got this Al-Qaeda offshoot that's now running the show, I think it's like something like, 25 to 30 miles from Israel's border. And so all of, now you've got to pull out new books and say like, okay, so let's read up on Syria, but not just Syria, but all these groups now. And who are they, and what are their intentions? First and foremost, I think it's very important to think about what their intentions are for the Syrian people. But secondly, Israel is looking at it from, what does that mean for us? So all of the troops that they had in southern Lebanon, and I think it was just like they had just said, okay, we're going to reduce the amount of reservists that we have now. Suddenly it's like they shifted a little bit to the east, and now they're on the border. They're in the demilitarized zone, the buffer zone between Syria and Israel, at looking, from Mount Hermon into Syria. I think there's something like 25 miles from Damascus now. And so that is extremely interesting. Obviously, what Israel has said, and Netanyahu, you probably heard this, he just went up there a couple days ago, and it was this hush thing, and there were so many rumors going around. They canceled his testifying at the trial that day, and then there were reports that, he's in Egypt because they're about to make a deal for the hostages. But then suddenly you find out, no, he was actually in Syria, in that buffer zone area, and saying like that Israel is going to stay right where it is until it knows, basically, these are my words, not his, exactly what is happening here, just to keep a line of defense. So because there's a lot of instability, and also, with the Druze, and I think the Druze towns are like on the border with Israel, and some of their, like, the families are split, some that live in Syria and some that live in Israel. And then there were questions as to whether or not they would want to be part of Israel or not. But
by the way, what's the status of that? Is anything been determined yet? Or is that, because I've also heard people say, it's hard to tell because social media and X and all this stuff, everybody posts their opinion like it's fact. So some of the pro-Syrian channels are, oh no, that's fake news. That's fake news.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I have, honestly, I have no idea, because like you said, it's also the Israelis are saying like, of course the Druze would want to live here. But the Syrians are saying, well, of course the Druze are welcome here, and where we want them to stay. So, the new Syrian government, the HTS government is saying.
The Druze are, what are they, 600,000 people in Syria or something like that, I think?
I don't know. know.
So that's a significant tax base, I guess, that they would want to protect. And so just so everybody knows, this blue area, this sliver of blue, that's the area that Israel has occupied since the rebels took over. There were some disturbances there, so Israel just said, we're going to take over the buffer zone and go a little bit into Syria. And then, of course, now everybody says, Israel, you'll see these, people that are, breathless and interviewed by Tucker Carlson, like Jeffrey Sachs, who's, I think, kind of a leftist lunatic. That's just my opinion. Saying, Israel's taking over Syria. Israel's going to occupy Syria. This is part of the greater Israel project. And, so everybody who's got a bone to pick with Israel, they come out of the woodwork. So when Israel took over this area, the Golan Heights, after the 67 and then the 73 war, some of these Druze villages, Druze families were split. Mm-hmm. Some lived in Syria, some lived in Israel. And it became increasingly difficult over time to go back and forth, particularly when the Hezbollah militias, the Shia militias, and ISIS were sort of present there along the Golan border. I remember that when we were there back in 2017 up in that area. So anyway, so today, so some of the Shia or some of the Druze villages have asked to become part of Israel.
Apparently, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, or is it just one or two Druze? And that's the thing, like you said, and I have to be very careful, especially when, first of all, we know we're not getting free media from a lot of these countries.
Right.
And so you can't necessarily read the regular media and trust that because it's government, it's government controlled. Now, the other problem is you can't also trust, you get a lot of news on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, but you also get a lot of, or more than a lot of, you get opinion. You get the news filtered through opinions. So if for instance, like if you're pro-Assad, you're getting only pro-Assad news, which would be that, the rebels are going to be really bad for Syria. But if you were persecuted by Assad, you're saying like, well, the rebels are the best thing that ever happened to Syria. So not having a formal education in the history of Syria and the politics and who was who, and then who these groups are, it's like I have to be extremely careful to find out like what
Right.
exactly to believe. I have spoken to a few people that are from Syria. Like one, for instance, is a Christian that he moved to America long time ago. But his sister still lives there, and he was before Damascus even fell. As soon as he heard a little bit, because he follows the Syrian news in Arabic, and he called his sister and he said, "You need to get out now." And they did not get out before Damascus fell. So I mean, I can get some of my updates from him and feel like I can trust, what he's telling me. And but other than that, it's really hard to trust sources that you don't know. But I will tell you that, like, also Israel from the beginning, Israel was attacking military targets in Syria, mostly Assad's leftover weapons. Also Iran's leftover weapons, because this was. It's funny. I just heard this interview yesterday with a Syrian analyst he's Syrian born. He lives abroad now. And it was him and another Syrian who also lives abroad. And they were talking about like what you said, like that Israel's plan is to occupy the country. But I understand what they're saying. I mean, they grew up with these fears that Israel's the main enemy. And I was like, wait a second, though. Iran was occupying your country right before, right? I mean,
Right.
the tunnels or the transit lines going from Iran to Hezbollah, and the Iranian bases or Hezbollah bases, or the Iranian proxy group bases all over. So what amazed me as well, right after Damascus fell, was when the Israeli Air Force went to work. They were, we're talking dozens of targets a day. Like, I don't know the exact number. When you do your next interview, you can ask. Maybe she knows. But so I don't know the exact number, but it's dozens, maybe 200 total targets. I don't know. The fact that they had this bank of targets, and it wasn't like they're hitting the Dahia in Beirut where Hezbollah is hiding, and there's also civilians walking around. It was like, no, I don't think civilians were killed. I didn't hear about any civilians being killed. It was literally just, they knew where the bases were, they knew where the weapons were, and they went, and it's like they had this list of weapons, and finally they had no resistance to do it. Because usually it was like, Russia, up until now was also in Syria. So apparently Israel would have to clear some of its attacks if it attacked like a weapons convoy that was going from Iran to Hezbollah through Syria. They'd have to get like, or tell Russia, like, heads up, where, we're flying our jets, like, don't worry, we're not coming for you. We're going to attack this. And we're like, okay, I mean, this is all tacit, like, probably none of this is official, but this had been going on. And suddenly no clearance, just do it. Like, it was just like open airs, like we're not talking about going into Lebanon, which has just been the name of the game for 14 months. It was just Syria, like open skies, like no resistance whatsoever. So that's what Israel spent 2 weeks doing.
I've heard I interviewed Danny Seaman the other day, and he had been on the IDSF channel, and he made an interesting comment that there's some thinking in the people that, have different contacts in the Israeli government, that they had some idea that this was going to happen, and that's why they did the ceasefire in Lebanon, so they could be ready. And it's interesting how quickly Israel has this incredible intelligence network. I mean, it's unmatched anywhere. I mean, we saw this, it was only it wasn't even 3 months ago that they did the beeper and pager attacks in Lebanon.
Right. And then they got Nasrallah and all the other Hezbollah leaders in one shot. But yeah.
Completely decapitated the Hezbollah leadership, their brigades, and went into Lebanon a little ways, not super far, but just took out a lot of infrastructure. And I mean, what's the thing? Are people in Israel surprised at what's happened?
It's funny that you say what Danny Seaman said, because I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking that the rebels took advantage of the ceasefire, not that Israel made the ceasefire because the rebels were on the move. So that's interesting.
And the other rumor that I heard, and of course this comes from the OSI, open source intelligence guys on X, but they're actually pretty good, and they're much quicker at getting things out there than regular media is. But I also hesitate to see something and then run with it immediately, because I want to be factual, not sensational, I guess is the way that I try to do it. But one of the things that's running around the open source intelligence community today is that Assad told Israel, in return for safe passage out of Syria, if they would help with that he would give them the locations of everything that should be attacked.
Oh,
to be taken. Now that's kind of it. And, I could see Assad doing that. So I want to,
interesting.
I mean, have you seen these videos though, that are coming out about the I can't remember the name of the one of the prisons where they think, 150 or 250,000 people were killed, mass burial sites up around Hama and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then I also have people that I don't know why they pop up in my feed on X that are very pro-Assad, pro-Syria, and they deny that any of this happened, that this is all they use terms like the jihadis that are running around Syria. I mean, and it's just, my feed is just this screed of people that hate Israel and are, pro-Islamic and that. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I actually stop and look at them occasionally, so I get fed more and more of it.
Keep getting them, right?
I know, it's like a torture chamber. But anyway, so and the other thing too is, I mean, what's the explanation for why there was no so Israel's destroyed billions of dollars of weapons and weapons stores and air defense systems all across Syria. They took out the Syrian Navy. And I think the Russians are massing they're having trouble getting everything out because they're tied up in Ukraine.
Right.
So they've been sending cargo planes down to Syria to get their stuff. But that's a question everybody has is, why was there no response from Iran? Why was there no response from Russia? Why did the Syrian army just evaporate? What's the thinking there right now about that?
Yeah, I actually have no idea. I mean, why? First of all, Iran. I mean, I will say some of the thinking. I mean, that's I don't know. I'll tell you some of the thinking is that, which I'm not sure is correct, is that that Iran was so weakened by what Israel did to Hezbollah, and that also that you notice that Hamas jumped into October 7th, and then they expected everybody to get involved, like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and they did. I mean, to some extent they got involved, but it wasn't all out. It was a little bit hesitant, because if Hezbollah was going all out, what would have happened. Like, Israel would pretty much, it would have been World War III. Most of Israel would have been under, like, in rubble right now, because they had 150,000 rockets back then, missiles, rockets, drones, etc. So nobody went all out. The Houthis, by the way, I don't know when you are going to publish this, but today, which is Thursday, December 19th, there were two Houthi launches at Israel, a drone and a missile. And actually, so one actually hit or near a school in Tel Aviv, and another one, I just read somewhere, but I wasn't able to confirm it before we started, that some of the shrapnel fell by the Knesset in Jerusalem for one of these things. So I don't know. So I didn't, end up. Yeah, I was like, wait, that's like 20 minutes, not even 20 minutes. 20 minutes only because of traffic from here. So. Of which there is all the time.
By the way, I mentioned to a friend of mine recently that proof that the old line that gets pushed is that the Jews control the world. You cannot believe that if you've driven in Jerusalem traffic.
Oh my God.
It's awful. It's awful, and there's nowhere to go, and this city has grown so much.
I like to say there's a big difference between startup nation and day-to-day nation. So God bless. But yeah.
Anyway, so
people think basically, okay, we weakened Iran and Iran's just watching out for itself. And so and one thing which I think does have a little bit of credibility is that the Iranian regime is more of a long-term and preservationalist. Is that a word? Like they're preserving themselves, thinking about themselves, keeping their borders secure and keeping order. So when they are threatened externally, rather than get involved and send, like, imagine if they did send their own military, Iranian soldiers to Syria, they might risk an uprising because of lack of defense, maybe in their own country. So that was another, one of the theories that was being floated as to why Iran didn't get involved. So the other question, of course, is, does this completely cut off Iran? Is it final? This is the final answer. You're cut off. You don't have your lifeline between Iran and Hezbollah right now. Like, Syria was the conduit. And is that final? Like, have they accepted that as the final answer, and they're done? And I'm not sure. Like, so I think these are things that we'll see. Now, that brings us, of course, to the winner. The winner of this whole thing that just happened in Syria is not necessarily the rebels, but I believe it's Erdogan and Turkey. And so just today as well in Cairo, I mean, who was it? The president of Iran and Erdogan shook hands in Cairo. There's some conference happening there, and I think it's also the first time that in several years that the Iranians are attending, and so that is something that we should be watching. Do they look at this as now like, oh, we've got to be friends with Turkey? because Turkey has positioned itself. So the other thing that Turkey has done, and this is like just to throw in a different continent altogether, because that's how these politics work, or that's how this region works. Turkey has just negotiated an agreement between Ethiopia and Somalia. And by doing that, actually has positioned itself as a stronger player in that region of Africa, Northern Africa, than Egypt, because Egypt had a dispute with Ethiopia for years. They might still have the dispute about a dam on the Nile River, like who's going to get who builds the dam, who gets the water. Like, I think Ethiopia had blocked it at first. Anyway, that's a whole other issue to get into. But if Turkey now has positioned itself in this part of Africa, this guy's playing the entire chessboard of the region. And, so that is really something to pay attention to. Like, I've recently, in the last like maybe 5 to 10 years, been paying attention to Turkey's moves, and also not just the moves, but what Erdogan says specifically. And a lot of his rhetoric that isn't necessarily reported overseas, but it's reported especially, like, him speaking to his country, is about returning the Ottoman Empire to its former glory. And that would mean all the way down to Jerusalem. But he is a very expansionist thinking leader. And so it looks like, I mean, I wonder, that's why also, everybody that we talked about that could possibly be behind what just happened in Turkey, he is yet another player, if not the biggest one, and if not the biggest winner in this whole thing.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. So I wrote an article for Bill Koenig's Watch.org. I can't find it, and I for some reason it disappeared from my computer, or whatever. It might have been when I was still practicing law. I stored it at the office and didn't take it with me when I left. But left meaning sort of retired, I guess. I wrote an article on Erdogan because he's a fascinating guy. I mean, he used to travel the ferries across the Bosporus, standing on the bow of the ship reciting the Quran. I mean, he's memorized the Quran. He's a radical Islamist. I'm pretty sure he was, and he's been at this for over 20 years. He turned the largest church in Christendom back into a mosque, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And there are maps. I mean, Foreign Policy was writing about this almost 10 years ago, that he had this hankering to move into northern Syria. And he's positioned himself. And I have friends that live in Jerusalem, and they say he's all over funding things in East Jerusalem to get influence. I mean, they said you can't move around the Armenian corridor, which you know very well, without running into Turkish people, tourists, and that type of thing. And they're talking about, we're going to restore the caliphate. The Ottoman Empire. So Ethiopia and Somalia have gotten into it because Egypt's mad at Ethiopia because of that big dam.
Right.
It's called the GERD, the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Yeah. And I always joke that it's giving Egypt a bad case of heartburn. The GERD dam. And so the Egyptians have kind of helped the Somalians out against Ethiopia. Ethiopia's landlocked, and so they were taking over a corridor through Somalia to get to the Red Sea.
Oh, okay.
Or to the Gulf of Aden. And that's led to and they've been at war. I mean, the whole thing is a complete mess. So, but right now, let's talk about Turkey, because you were mentioning some things when we talked ahead of time. in northern Syria. So just people, if you're looking at the map, this yellow area is northeast Syria. Raqqa here in the middle, that's where ISIS had its capital for a time. And this is along the Euphrates River that goes through this area. And the yellow area has been...
I don't see the map.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No.
Oh,
I don't know if
it would help if I
actually
help if I put the map up.
I thought it was just me.
Sorry about that. I can see it right here for me. Okay, there we go. So Raqqa in the middle, that's where ISIS had its capital for a time. Can you see the map now?
Yeah.
Okay. And then this yellow area, that's the Kurdish and they're a very tribal, very divided group of people, but I think it's the largest ethnic group that doesn't have their own country in the world. It's, I don't know, 20, 30 million people that live in Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. And, so they want their own state, but, that doesn't appear to be happening. And Erdogan hates the Kurds.
Right.
He thinks every Kurd is a terrorist. There are some that are. We have to be honest about that. But so on each side of this little yellow finger in the middle of the screen, there's sort of a grayish area. The black line is the Turkish border, but Turkey has been controlling those gray areas for some time. And now, for example, there's a town called Manbij, I think it's called, that's in a green area now to the west of the Euphrates River that Turkey has taken over, or rebels have taken over since the fall of Damascus. Mm-hmm. And now there are reports. Well, tell me what you were telling me about Turkey yesterday, what the reports are. Because I've seen this a lot of places about Turkey massing troops.
You told me that actually.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. The reports are there's been some bombing by Turkey into the Kurdish areas of the border, and that Turkey's massing troops there ready to invade. Now, I've seen this multiple places.
Okay.
And so Turkey's in an expansionist mode. And they want to defeat the Kurds. They don't want an independent Kurdistan anywhere, even in Syria, under any circumstances. And the report, and very credible reports, Nicole, for over the last 3 months, Turkey has conducted above 5,000 bombing runs into the Kurdish areas of Syria. So there's a war going on that we don't talk about. And Erdogan just sort of stands back and goes to these conferences and act like, well, I'm above it all. And I'm just sort of, I just want Syria to be free. I think what he means, he wants Syria to be free to become part of the new caliphate that he wants to establish.
Yeah, what free? He's also he's backing some of the rebel groups. So they're beholden to him. So he's de facto ruling through them, or will be.
I saw a quote of Al-Jilani, the head of the rebel groups, saying something today about, I'd have to dig the exact quote out, but essentially saying, we respect Turkey and we look forward to working with them. Mm-hmm. Because they've funded them for years. Yeah. And that's the other thing, too, is how did these guys, everybody was shocked at the speed that they went through this with, and they've been fighting among themselves for a while, but this Al-Jilani brought them all together, and they've prepared for 2 or 3 years to do this. I mean, they were well prepared, and they just did a blitzkrieg across Syria because it's several hundred miles.
Listen, we have to remember that he had up until right now, he has a $10 million bounty on his head by the U.S. government. He's somebody that is considered a terrorist. He's on the terrorist watch list, and and then it's so interesting because now he's this reformed character that the EU is there to meet with him. There's different European ambassadors that are going there and having outreach saying, we must be here. We must, we don't want to leave a vacuum here in Syria, so our presence is important. And I'm like, wow, 2 weeks ago, he was most wanted on the list, and now everybody's rushing to put their embassy there. Now, I'm not saying that the U.S. is. The U.S. is being very cautious about the whole situation, and the U.S. is there as well. So it's also like everybody's waiting to see how this plays out, because up until now, Syria has been the playground for for Russia, Iran, U.S. and Israel. And Turkey, unbeknownst to us, also like behind the scenes funding and getting ready for their grand entry into Syria. So it's really interesting. And also what you said about the Kurds. So I remember you did mention that to me yesterday. You sent me that it looks like Turkey is amassing troops to have a full out war. And then I saw an article that totally supports this theory, or maybe it's more than a theory, that this is the theory, is that he's got to do it before Trump gets inaugurated. So that could be why it's happening now, that the troops are being amassed, because he's only got about a month to get it done, if that's his plan.
Well, so you wrote an article, you said, about Trump policy in Lebanon. Do you see that impacting this whole situation at all?
Yeah, I mean, I can see, well, it depends. We have to, I think what we're going to want to see is if Lebanon can maintain safe borders through the Syrian transition. Now, Lebanon is surrounded by Syria and just a little bit at the bottom by Israel, and then, to the west, the Mediterranean Sea. So if Lebanon can maintain its borders, it'll be interesting to see who gets elected president, because the country's been without a president for a while. So that will be interesting to see. First of all, the safety of the borders. Like, will the Hezbollah members that fled into Syria at the beginning of the war, will they flee back? Or will they be captured? Because, by the way, I mean, I don't know, if everybody knows this, but Hezbollah is hated by the rebels. And when Israel was in the throes of, taking out Hezbollah leaders and infrastructure, the rebels were uploading videos of rejoicing. They were handing out sweets, like they were praising Israel, which is just like, it's a cognitive dissonance to hear these, these Arabic speaking groups praising Israel, for the war that it was, against Hezbollah, because most of the Arabic speaking voices are saying Israel is committing genocide. Israel is ethnic cleansing, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. And then suddenly there were these Arab voices that were saying, like, Israel is doing God's work right now by taking out, the Hezbollah leaders. And so all of those videos came out, and I couldn't believe it. So there's this there's this huge hatred between Hezbollah and the rebels. Hezbollah was doing Assad and Iran's bidding against the rebels, back during the Civil War. So now the tables have turned, and the fact that they've turned against Hezbollah is one thing, but we have to also just be cautious with the rebel groups, what they're going to do, like with other minorities, like the Christians that are there. But as far as Lebanon, if Lebanon can maintain its borders, its security, and if it can elect a good president, then I think we will see, we'll see Trump being active, I think, in Lebanon. He has Mossad Boulos. He's going to be like an advisor on the Middle East, but I'm sure that his heart is also with Lebanon. And if you look at, Trump is known for making deals. He offered the Palestinians an economic plan that would be a path to statehood as well. And it involved a lot of investment and first business and then politics. But the Palestinians are like, no, 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 first state, then business. So that didn't work out. And then there were, the relations turned sour between Palestinians and the US during Trump's first term. But after Trump won, and actually starting from when there was an assassination attempt on him, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, actually contacted Massad Boulos, who is this, Lebanese American, and he said, "Oh, send my regards to Trump and my wishes for his safety and everything." And then after his election, Abbas called Trump and congratulated him. So there's the fact that now that Boulos is the go-to for the Palestinians, but I can also see that this economic plan would be great for Lebanon, like a similar economic plan, because Lebanon's economy has been in dire straits for several years. I mean, at least I'm thinking even 2020, it was already bad when there was the port explosion. But Lebanon is suffering. It's suffering also from, economically, but also politically. There's so many different factions, and the stranglehold of Hezbollah, which is still accepted by some people, as a political party and as a player in Lebanon, but not by everybody. We'll see what happens, but I think there's reason to hope, but I don't want to get everybody's hopes too high either, as far as Lebanon.
Yeah, it's a very fluid situation, and so I know I promised we'd keep this to a reasonable length because we could sit here and chat about it all day. But so I want to talk about one other thing, because I know that Turkey's involved in other areas, one of which I think is sort of important to you because of your husband, your family in Armenia and that type of thing. So I'm going to pull up my little map here of the Middle East. So I'm going to... So the yellow area, again, you can see down here to the lower left is Syria. But when we go up here, I think this is the area, and it's a blue area because it's in dispute. This is Baku on the right. This little peninsula out into the Caspian Sea is Baku, Azerbaijan. And then you go across to the Black Sea, and then next to Azerbaijan is Armenia, and there's this disputed area. And just sort of, do you think Turkey's involved in that as well?
Oh, yes, 100%.
So explain to us what's going on there.
Yeah, so Turkey, well, first of all, this must be an old map, because it's kind of not a disputed area anymore. This was Nagorno-Karabakh, and after after 9 months of, was it 9 or a little bit more, 9 to 10 months of Azerbaijan cutting off the passageway between Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, and so there was a place, it was called Artsakh by Armenia, and it was where ethnic Armenians lived for centuries and lived there like monolithically. It was Armenian territory, and that's where they lived. And now it goes back to Stalin's redrawing all of the former states that were part of the Soviet Union. And even if we had time, I probably couldn't explain it the best, right? So after the Soviet Union fell, it was like, whose land is it? No, Armenia said it's ours, and Azerbaijan said no, it's ours. And so there were sporadic wars or fighting from 1991 until 2023. And what happened was 120,000 Armenians that lived in that area were pretty much starved almost to death. There were no trucks allowed in. It was the only way in and out. And Azerbaijan shut the border. and wouldn't even let in humanitarian aid or medical aid or anything. And then they began an invasion in September 2023. And then all the 120,000 Armenians were ethnically cleansed from that area and went into Armenia proper. And that was the end. And now the Azeris have taken over that area. But the president of Azerbaijan and Erdogan are very strong allies and friends. They have a lot of the same speak. Like, for instance, when Erdogan talks about the Ottoman Empire, and he says, like, Jerusalem is ours, like it's a fact. And also Aliyev says, he talks about Western Azerbaijan, and he talks about Yerevan, which is the capital of Armenia, a Christian nation, the first Christian nation in the world. He talks about Yerevan being Western Azerbaijan, which means that he has designs for the whole country, just like Erdogan has designs for the previous borders of the Ottoman Empire. So and then you see, like, if you want to bring up the map again, you can see that Iran is just to the south of all three of these countries.
Yeah, let me pull up I have a little bit different map without that colored insert.
Okay, so Azerbaijan and Iran and Turkey and Iran don't have necessarily the best relations, but they're probably working on them. But Armenia does not have diplomatic relations with either Turkey or Azerbaijan. But Armenia is this small country still developing and was reliant on Russia for many years, since the fall of the Soviet Union, still had Russia to, for its, backing in the neighborhood. Now, Russia has been preoccupied with Ukraine, obviously, and anyway, seems to no longer be interested in the region. But Armenia...
Which side are the Iranians on?
Well, is
that hard to...
No, I think I can see, like, if they're in the south, they're all this is south. Oh, so whose side are they on? Not which.
Yeah. Whose side are they on in this dispute?
Side? Yeah. Yes. So they, believe it or not, are with Armenia. So I mean,
which is strange because I think Khamenei's wife is Azeri.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a large Azeri population in Iran.
Correct.
Like northern Iran is like full of Azeris. So but here's why, because it's not like because anybody really loves anybody in this situation, right? But there's that little strip of land, that little border. I don't know if you can point to it between Iran and Armenia. It's like 2 inches right there. Yeah, right there. The mountain that line right there is the border between Iran and Armenia. And so that is Iran's only access way. It doesn't go through Turkey and it doesn't go through Azerbaijan, but they go through Armenia. So they don't want to lose that. But Azerbaijan wants to build a highway. I'm totally pointing. None of you guys can see me point. It's so funny, but they want to build a highway between their land and this little chunk of land right there before Turkey, because that's Azeri territory as well.
So
around
this area here.
Yeah, they want to build a highway from there to Azerbaijan.
Who does, Turkey or Iran?
Both Turkey and Azerbaijan. They want to connect themselves from Azerbaijan through Armenia. But that would be, it would go like this, and it would cut off Iran's access going north.
Okay.
So that's
Iran's trying to build a trade corridor with Russia, I believe. And I believe, wasn't the Raisi, the president of Iran, who was taken out, as some people said, by the operative named Eli Copter.
Huh. Okay.
In that helicopter crash.
Yeah.
But wasn't he up in the north of
Yep.
Iran
And he was
dedicating a
meeting
dam or something that they were building
with,
up there?
yes, with the president of Azerbaijan.
Okay.
Yes, with Aliyev. They were both there. They were both there that day. They both got in their own transportation to leave, and Raisi died in a crash.
Along
Yeah,
with the
right
foreign
then.
minister of Iran.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was unbelievable. That was in May, I think.
It seems like that was like 4 years ago
I know,
in
because so
Middle
much has
East time.
happened.
Isn't it
Yes.
strange?
Oh my gosh. So
So what do you think? I mean, so Turkey's playing everybody against everybody else, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, it's are the, are they the ones doing it? Is Iran doing it? Is the deep state of everybody else behind it, and they all agree with each other, and they're all doing, these are, I watch how everybody's playing, this chessboard of the Middle East and the whole region, the wider region, and everywhere actually. And I always look at the politics, like, okay, where's Turkey, where's Iran, and this, and then you see them meeting and shaking hands in another place, and you're like, are they just playing us that they're enemies? Like, what's really happening? So I watch the game, and then I have to always take a step back and say, like, but who's really playing, and what's the game here, and are we the ones being played? And I don't know, and I can't say that I will know, but I'm definitely watching what Turkey's doing. I was definitely emphatic that they were the ones all the way to Damascus, and he had said, Erdogan said, Idlib, Homs, and Damascus, that's the goal. Like going from north to south in Syria, like Damascus is the goal. And I emphatically said, no, Jerusalem is his goal. But then I just heard somebody today say that his whole criticism of Israel over the past few months, because he's been very caustic against Israel, even more so than Azerbaijan, let's say, and the Gulf states and anyone. He took the lead against Israel, but that he's made a deal with Netanyahu that I'll get to here, but then I'll give you the border or whatever. Like, oh my gosh! Like, so what to believe and when is always the question. And then I read yesterday. Here's just to throw in another random Gulf state, that Qatar has reestablished relations with Syria. And then I see that Qatar long ago had a pipeline that it wanted to run for its oil and gas, that it would go through Syria, that it would go from Qatar through Saudi Arabia and then through Syria, and then from Syria, could go to Europe and I was like, oh my gosh. So now Qatar, who is, as you probably know, they're the ones hosting the negotiations for the hostage deal for the Israelis. There's still 100 hostages that are in Gaza, and they're the ones that are brokering this deal. And they were out for a little while, and now they're back in, and now they're reestablishing relations with Syria. And then I look back, and it's like, oh, the pipeline. I bet, they're going to do the best they can do now to negotiate this deal so that everybody else in the region will be like, okay, Qatar, you did your job. You got us the deal. The hostages are out. Now you can have your pipeline going through Syria. So I don't know this for sure, but I think we all need to watch what happens, what develops over the next few months. If it's not actually that Syria was laid, that this was laid out, not for the rebels and not for all these Syrian nationalists that want to go back to their homeland and get rid of the Assad regime and stuff like that, but maybe it's continuing to be the playground for the rest of the world that wants military bases and possibly pipelines going through that land. So that will be what I will be watching over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, here's just a quick, let me, whoops. I need a staff to help me do this.
Oh, you're telling me. I know.
So this is just some of the pipelines proposed that You know, Qatar and Iran, one Sunni, one Shia. You know, Qatar is the big supporter of Al Jazeera, Muslim Brotherhood. They share the largest natural gas field in the world. It's an incredibly valuable gas resource. So they were proposing building this pipeline up across Syria. And some people think that's why the whole Syrian civil war started. It's probably something that's forgotten to history at this point. But it'll be interesting to see how this is revived. Because remember the map that Netanyahu held up at the UN just 2 weeks before October 7th, saying we're going to have this Middle East, Saudi Arabia, or India, Middle East, European trade corridor that's going to go across Saudi Arabia and Israel. And it seems like a lot of that stuff is kind of on hold, but Qatar's in it for the money, obviously.
Yeah.
And the Saudis are taking over golf and others. I think they're getting the World Cup of Soccer here.
Qatar had it last time, so why not?
With incredible amounts of corruption that took place.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So, but this is before this happened, like you could see that Qatar was making all these overtures and portraying itself as Western, and now it'd be a long shot for them to suddenly be like Abraham Accords, I think, but now that you see like on the legend of the map you had, it said like US backed, like the Qatar version is the US backed one. So I'm like, okay. So, that makes sense. That's what they're going to do.
It seems convenient when we have, and by the way, we're still, 20 days in January, and this is what, the 18th, 19th?
Oh, yeah.
So we're 31 days away from Trump supposedly and we only say this here in the U.S. now.
Right.
Theoretically, he's taking office on January 20th.
Right. And
we don't know.
And here you would say, inshallah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there would be some invective, or we think that's what's going to happen. And so, just real quickly, what do you think's happening in the near term? When I say near term, I mean a little bit more than 24 hours. Oh
my God, I could more easily predict like 30 days or a year than 24 hours. At this place, you go to sleep thinking one thing, you wake up with like a new reality. So, but all right. So, what's your question? Sorry.
Well, what do you think's going to happen in the long term? How do you see this shaking out?
Wow. All right. I want to be optimistic, and I want to say that. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to this. I think that Trump's victory put a real big pause in the region. Like, I think a lot of people, nations, leaders are like, okay, there's a new sheriff in town, and well, it's a new old sheriff, and we know what he's like. And I hope, and I'm not, whenever they say that a hostage deal is near, I'm like, let's not rush to it, because let's not rush to be excited, because it never happens. I honestly think that the hostages, there will be a deal before Trump takes office, if I can use that as my parameter. I think Erdogan's going to try to take as much as he can as well, territorially, before Trump takes office. I do have hope that the Trump administration is going to be more favorable to Armenia. And I do think that the new Trump administration is very pro-Israel, but I do see that it's going to cause a lot of internal friction, because despite the fact that there's a lot of pro-Israel, even like Huckabee is like not just pro-Israel, he's pro-settlement, but it's going to cause a lot of internal conflict, because there's also, like, if you want to see more an expansion of the Abraham Accords, you're going to have a lot more voices calling for a Palestinian state. And that's going to be tough for Netanyahu's government, and it's going to be tough for diplomats like Mike Huckabee. So that will be an interesting balancing act that's going to happen that I've got my eyes on. Now, at the same time, and I've got to play around with this more in my mind, just this thinking that when I've spoken to people who are generally more pro-Palestinian, and something surprising that more than one of them has said that the idea of the two-state solution is over. And I was like, wow. So that made me pause a little bit. So I think as far as the Palestinians, and now seeing like Abbas's overture towards Trump, and also the complete devastation of Gaza. It's completely devastated. Like, if you don't have to call it genocide or ethnic cleansing, but but Gaza is either a military zone or destroyed. Very, there's obviously like large swaths that are left standing, yes, but it's not inhabitable anymore as a place for people to live. So these are the things that I'm watching to see who's going to come in and be the benefactor now, and is it going to be as a state, or is it going to be as a benefactor, like the UAE or the Saudis? Are they going to take the Palestinians under their arms? Are they going to move the Palestinians? Are they, these are things I'm waiting to see. And I don't know, like I've given you more questions than answers, but these are the things that I'm mulling around, and hoping that we do see a release of hostages by Trump's inauguration. But there are other areas of concern as well, like Turkey taking more territory by then, and see what he'll do with the Kurds. That's what I got.
So how does it, just one last question. So does this really have an impact on your life living there? I mean, how does that factor in? I mean, are you used to it, or what?
Yeah, a very interesting question. We've normalized abnormal, and we've also, I think, since COVID, you just live here with very little planning. You don't give too much forethought to the future and to plans and stuff like that. You live in a bubble of instability, and you create your own routine or stability within that. So, since October 9th of 2023, Jerusalem has not been a place of rockets or war. We've had random things. So Jerusalem quickly went back to normal, but it was normal with, by the way, no Christmas, because even the Christians, like the Christian churches, are, in solidarity with the Christians in Gaza. Were only 1,000 before the war. Now there's even fewer. But, so like, we're not going to have Christmas trees. We're not going to have this and that. So like, there's just this constant recalibration of reality, and none of it's normal. Like, and so it doesn't affect our day to day. Like, I can go to the store, my kids are at school, we're working, but it's just not normal. Like, I wouldn't tell people to come visit now, kind of a thing.
Okay. That's interesting. So I'll put a couple links down in the show notes as to where they can follow you. Nicole, thanks a lot. Always appreciate it. We'll look forward to doing it again in the near future. Have a good day. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, John. Bye. Thanks.